Today we're going to look at doing claim, evidence, and reasoning, and we're going to do this by looking at a poem by Tupac, The Rose That Grew from Concrete. Now, some of you may know about Tupac, others might not know as much, but the first thing I want to do is to show you a quick video on him to give you a little background about who he was so we can better understand what his poem might mean. After we watch that video, we're going to listen to that poem being read aloud, and then after that, we're going to analyze the poem, and we're going to do a process of claim, evidence, and reasoning. All right, here we go. So this is a little bit of background on Tupac. This is a 4-minute video. Let's find out who he was before we start analyzing his poem.
Tupac Shakur is one of the all-time greats.
Actor, poet, and rap legend Tupac Shakur was one of Rolling Stone's 100 greatest artists of all time.
Pac's hip-hop presence wasn't just about being a good rapper. The reason why people look so highly of him is because of his poetry, because he could act, because he did all those artistic things so well.
Tupac Amaru Shakur was born on June 16, 1971. While his mother was an activist who raised him under the Black Panther philosophy, she was also a drug addict who moved him from homes to homeless shelters before Shakur found refuge at the Baltimore School for the Arts.
Tupac's life with family members in Black Panther Party had a very significant impact on him because there's always a social responsibility that's always incorporated into his music.
After moving to California in 1988, Shakur became a background dancer and vocalist for the group Digital Underground.
He was a quasi-roadie, dancer, and sometimes on that tour, they gave him the stage. Very energetic kid, very smart, very wise, very measured.
In 1991, Tupac changed rap forever with his debut single, Brenda's Got a Baby, from the album Tupacalypse Now.
He could be the rapper, he could be the celebrity, he could be the MC. But that same rapper, celebrity, MC made a record called Brenda Had a Baby. He wasn't afraid of responsibility. That's what makes him great.
Shakur appeared in several films, including a starring role in the 1992 film Juice. The next year, he released his second album, which featured the hit singles I Get Around and Keep Your Head Up.
One of my favorite records is that Keep Your Head Up. That was just like what people dare not to ever talk about, is how a woman might have some problems being a single mother. That was undoubtedly one of his greatest works. That was more gangster than gangster.
Although a rising rap star, Shakur was arrested 5 times from 1992 to 1994 for violent offenses. He spent 10 days in prison for beating another rapper with a baseball bat, 15 days for punching director Alan Hughes. And in 1995, Shakur was sentenced to up to 4.5 years in prison for sexual assault.
Tupac had this famous tattoo on his stomach, spelled out the words Thug Life. And he did embrace the gangster lifestyle in some ways. He sometimes carried a gun, he was quick-tempered, he didn't always respect women, and that was one side of who he was.
In 1995, Shakur became the first artist to reach #1 on the Billboard charts while incarcerated, with his double platinum album, Me Against the World.
The album Me Against the World had a song Dear Mama on it, and I think this was significant in Pac's career because it showed, I hate to say it, a softer side. It really showed how much he cared for his mother and how much he appreciated her, and everyone can relate to that.
After serving 8 months in prison, Shakur released the album All Eyes on Me. It reached #1 on the Billboard charts and featured the #1 hits California Love and How Do You Want It.
Unfortunately, Tupac's All Eyes on Me record did contribute to the East Coast-West Coast feud that he had with Notorious Big and Puffy. When he did all his promotional interviews for the record, he talked a lot about the feud. And on the B-sides, he had a song called Hit 'Em Up, where he even alleged that he slept with Notorious Big's wife. And it just really fueled the tension between artists on both coasts.
On September 7, 1996, Shakur was gunned down in Las Vegas while driving with the CEO of Death Row Records, Suge Knight. 6 days later, Tupac Shakur died from his injuries, yet rumors still persist that he remains alive.
For the first 10 years after his passing, 6 albums were released and each of them had hit records on it. 15 years after his passing, a hologram image of Tupac showed up at a Dr. Dre concert in Coachella and freaked everyone out. Tupac is essentially the Elvis of the hip-hop community. He's never gonna die.
Interesting. So the reason why we watched that video, get a little background on Tupac, is because often, not always, but often the case, the artist's own lives and what they experience influence what they write about. So some of the things I noticed about Tupac's lives, one, his mother was addicted to drugs. I think that's something that, that was a difficulty that he experienced in his life, and that we might see that in some of his work or his poetry. I see that he experienced violence. He was shot and killed. He also went to prison, and he was violent himself. His offenses, the things that he did, were the reason why he went to prison. Despite all these things that happened, he sold an album that was #1 on the charts, and this happened while he was in prison. So very clear that even though Tupac faced all these obstacles, he was still incredibly famous and incredibly successful. So much so that people say that Tupac is still alive. Even though he's clearly dead, people think about him as being so important, so significant, that they still believe he's alive in some ways, and his music is still influencing people today. So the reason we look at a background of an author is just to understand a little bit about who they were, so that the things about them we can use to help us figure out the work that they created. So now that we know a little bit about Tupac, we're going to listen to his work here, and then we're going to analyze it and do our claim, evidence, and reasoning. So listen to The Rose That Grew from Concrete.
The rose that grew from concrete. Did you hear? Did you hear about the rose that grew from a crack in the concrete? Proving nature's laws wrong, it learned to walk without having feet. Funny it seems, but by keeping its dreams, it learned to breathe fresh air. Long live the rose that grew from concrete when no one else even cared.
Okay, so that's the poem. So we've learned about Tupac, we've heard his poem. Now let's take it a little slower and just analyze this poem. Did you hear about the rose that grew from a crack in the concrete? That's the first thing in this poem that's standing out to me. It's a rose, and it grew from a crack in the concrete. You can see the picture of it here. I've never seen something like that before. Roses, plants like this, they don't typically grow in places like that, sidewalk of the concrete. So I'm going to say this doesn't usually happen. Roses don't grow from concrete. So I'm thinking to myself, what is Tupac trying to say here? What's his message? Why is he saying there's a rose that grew from a crack in the concrete? And when I think back about Tupac's life, and I think about how his mother was addicted to drugs, how he experienced violence, he was shot and killed, right? He went to prison, and even though he was in prison, he was able to make that #1 selling album, and people still say Tupac's alive because of how important he was. I'm realizing that we're not talking about plants here. We're talking about people. Specifically, we're talking about Tupac and other people like Tupac who experience a really difficult situation, a situation that's like concrete, and yet they're still able to be successful in them. So what I think Tupac is trying to say here is Tupac is trying to say that we can succeed even when a situation seems difficult or impossible. Based on what I know about Tupac's life, how much he had to deal with the issues of drugs and his family, with prison, with violence, he was still able to be really successful. So I think that's what's going on here. This rose in some ways symbolizes Tupac and how he's able to be successful, even though the world around him was not helping him in any way. And I think that's true not just for Tupac, but it could be true for anyone. But let's keep reading the poem to analyze it a little more. Proving nature's laws wrong, it learned to walk without having feet. A Look at that. Learn to walk without having feet. So, most people would say that it's impossible to walk without having feet. It's impossible to walk without having feet. All right? But this Rose learned to do it. So, Rose did it. Of course, roses, we know, don't have feet. So it's clear he's not talking about plants, he's talking about people. And if he's saying people can walk without having feet, I think that really means he's saying people can succeed even when they don't have what they need to succeed. That's really impressive. He's saying you can do something that seems impossible, like walking without having feet, or if you're a rose growing in that concrete, that place that's not there to help you grow. Funny it seems, but by keeping its dreams, it learned to breathe fresh air. I think he's definitely saying a message about dreams there, the importance of dreams. Long live the rose that grew from concrete when no one else ever cared. Interesting. So first things first, I'm going to highlight this. By keeping its dreams, it learned to breathe fresh air. So I think he's saying dreams help us succeed. By keeping our dreams, we get to breathe fresh air like the rose, or get to where we want to be. Then he says, long live the rose that grew from concrete when no one else ever cared. So I think when no one else ever cared, that's like an obstacle. People not caring is an obstacle. Something that gets in your way, something that doesn't help you. But you can still succeed even if no one helps you. Even if you have this obstacle of no one caring about you, I think he's saying it's still possible to succeed. So after looking at Tupac's history, his background, and then analyzing his poem like this, I think I'm getting what his message or his claim is. And it's that people can succeed even when the world around them is not helping them succeed, even when they're in a difficult situation. So I'm going to make that my claim. People can succeed even when they are in the most difficult situations. Okay. So, now that I have this claim, I have to prove it. I have to find some evidence from the text that shows that this is true. I'm going to start with this piece of evidence here. It learned to walk without having feet. It's talking about the rose. It learned to walk without having feet. That's my evidence. And now my reasoning. I'm going to explain that evidence. I'm going to explain what it means. So, when Tupac says the rose learned to walk without having feet, what he means is that it succeeded even though it didn't have what it needed to be successful. His message to people is that we can succeed when we don't have everything we need to be successful. Just like this rose learned to walk without having feet, he's saying people can learn to do incredible things even when the world around them isn't helping them do it. Just like Tupac in his own life, he was able to succeed even though he experienced violence, crime, and being in prison. He was still being able to succeed. So I think that's so important that I'm actually going to put it in my reasoning here. Tupac himself was able to become incredibly successful even though he faced a lot of obstacles. Drugs, violence, and prison. Being able to succeed despite these obstacles shows us that we can succeed even in the most difficult situations. All right. I feel like we're getting somewhere. I feel like I've got the message of what Tupac is trying to say, and I've got my evidence that proves it, and some reasoning that shows that it's true. It's not enough to just have one piece of evidence and one reasoning, though. It's good to have at least three. For the sake of keeping this video short, I'm going to add just one more, and then you can try the third one on your own. So, what other piece of evidence here shows us that people can succeed even when they're in the most difficult situations? So I think this line here, when no one else ever cared, shows that. So I'm going to put that, here's my evidence, when no one else ever cared. Now I'm going to reason a little bit and explain that. So I'm going to say here, when Tupac writes, when no one else ever cared, he's talking about how we can succeed even though other people might not help us. We know that Tupac himself succeeded even though he didn't have his mother for a time in his life helping him succeed. He also succeeded when he was in jail and no one was there to help him. So I think that Tupac is teaching us that we can succeed even in a difficult situation where there is no one who supports us. Alright, so to keep the video short, I'm going to end it right there, but this is how we'd go about looking at an author's history, and then their work, and then doing a claim, evidence, and reasoning.